Welcome to the second debate in our series on Internet Inqalab. Today we're discussing international situation on internet laws around the world, how different governments are reacting to the explosion of social media, how they're working it out, and how people who don't want it controlled in those countries are working against those laws. So we have with us today Aman Lekhi, senior advocate, criminal lawyer, extremely well known in the courts. Kian Gans.
Correct.
Is legally India's founder and publishing editor, an ex-Magic Circle lawyer and a former journalist at the Lawyer magazine in the UK. You're now based in Mumbai?
Yes, I am, and Delhi.
And he currently also writes about the Indian legal market for Indian Business Daily, paper Mint, and a number of other international publications. Chinmay Arun, who is going to introduce herself.
I'm Research Director for the Center for Communication Governance at the National Law University, Delhi. I am also a fellow of the Center for Internet and Society.
Thank you. Aman, let's start with you. This government has particularly been very active in first passing the Section 66A, the amendments to the Act, the Internet Act, and has become known in internet circles as the government who set in controls, set in amendments and laws in which people are open to being arrested, harassed, being their websites blocked or their Twitter handles blocked. Do you think that this is the right direction to go?
You see, it's not an easy question to answer because there are various issues in it which we have to address. On opposite ends of the spectrum, you have on one side complete freedom, which may lead to cyber anarchy. On the other side, you have freedom of expression and therefore the right to dissent, that is cyber dissidence. Now, as far as regulation is concerned, regulation is to control the anarchy without in any way impinging upon the dissidents. Now, as far as the laws are concerned, in the world over, the countries can be divided into two categories. One, and I will not put India in the latter category, which the way you started. One, whether it is the UK, the European Union, or the USA, and India, I will put India in that category on one side, and we got China, we got Iran, we got Cuba, we got Korea on the other side. And so far as India is concerned, I don't think India can in any way be linked with the latter category. Why? Because insofar as the entire exercise is concerned, the exercise is repressive in the sense that they have a political agenda which is sought to be promoted, for which reason the internet access is restricted, there is trawling over the sites, and in fact formation of opinion. What the Indian law, and in fact law which will be there in the European Union, UK, USA is concerned, deals with regulation. And I don't think regulation is something which we should necessarily frown at or find disagreeable. Why? Because if you look at this section as such, one is what the section says, and the other is how the section is abused. Now the section, when it deals with the section, it deals with words which are legally known, like whether it's menacing character or grossly offensive, in the sense that they can get a legal meaning which can be used.
How can inconvenience and annoyance?
Yes, I'll come to that. I'll come to that. Now, it's not, you see, that is a misreading of the section. And when you read the section as a whole, it deals with three different facets. One, it should be false. Two, it should be the series of adjectives which are over there, inconvenience, annoyance, and it should be repetitive. So you just can't lift one portion of it and say, see, because it's inconvenience and annoyance, therefore it is for that reason bad.
But all the arrests that took place were not false and were not repetitive.
No, insofar as the arrests are concerned, that goes, please understand, when a law is passed, a law is capable of abuse. Now, because the law is capable of abuse, doesn't necessarily make the law bad. What is bad is
if you frame a law in such a way that it is open to abuse,
I'll give you an example.
Then why write a law in a way that it's open to abuse?
You can't ever, you can never formulate a law in so precise a terms as to in some way immune it from abuse. That is not something.
But here it seems to be planned to write it in such a vague way that it is open to abuse.
No,
Can I just point out one thing?
Yes.
Reporters Without Borders has made a list of countries who are named as enemies of the internet. India is thankfully not yet in that list.
We have
a list of China, Cuba, Iran, North Korea, all that you mentioned, as well as Syria, Bahrain, but however, India is put as a country under surveillance, meaning we are being warned and we are being watched.
May I answer?
We're on. I'll come back to you if I take the same thing to
Kian. Well, I think first of all, taking a step back, I think no country is actually very friendly towards the internet. A couple of countries make a lot of money out of the internet, and they've had more time to get used to the internet and what it means. They have perhaps a more stable democracy. But even some of the oldest democracies like the UK or the US, they're not necessarily welcoming the internet and the free speech that it provides its citizens. I think the US has a lot more constitutional protections for free speech. That goes for journalism as well as simply social networks and what the average citizen might want to communicate. But I think every country and every government has some incentive to stop people from saying what they want to say. It keeps the country more stable if you have some control over that, and it's natural that there's an impulse on every country to start these kind of laws. I think China, for example, they started something just this week where they have said any rumors, I think untrue rumors or something like that, which are, or was actually a Chinese court decided any untrue rumors which are circulated by more than 500 people on the Chinese equivalent of Twitter could be imprisonable offense for the person who first circulated it. Likewise, if more than 5,000 people read it, you could go into jail for it if it has certain consequences and these kind of things. So this kind of law from China is not that dissimilar to what's actually practically happened in India. That's the problem. Like if you look at something like Bal Thackeray Facebook post, which is quite infamous, the effect of that is actually just as bad on the prima facie level as, for example, the new rules are in China. Right. That for something that hasn't actually had any appreciable effect or any negative consequence, someone is bullied and harassed. Now, that is a negative consequence that has happened from a very vague law and from very, very sloppy implementation. Now, I think the government is very aware that the laws are very, very vague, and for them it's actually an interest to keep them vague. Exactly. Because it allows the police and allows certain local factions and politicians and powerful people to abuse the law against people who don't actually understand what the facets of it is. And I agree, if this law were to go to the Supreme Court, as it currently is with the mouthshut.com case, if it were to go to the Supreme Court and was actually looked at on constitutional grounds, they would say there's no way that we can interpret it that whenever anyone is annoyed, they would have to take that content down.
Keeping it on the international level, we had in the United Kingdom after the riots in 2011, Cameron spoke in Parliament about the need to control the social media. However, after a committee was formed, they came to the conclusion that there would be more damage done if they tried to control it than to let it run as it is. Now, just now we've had this incident in Muzaffarnagar where apparently, and I spoke to a raw
video.
Yeah, I spoke to a raw official just before this discussion, and he told me that they have identified the person who put the fake videos up, and they are URLs from outside. And he says that the international police in those countries, in almost all countries, are very cooperative when it comes to things like this. Now, the fact is that if the kind of controls that government wants, which they did during the Assam violence, and what they did in blocking off websites, blocking off Twitter handles, how beneficial was that in controlling the situation? Don't you think it would have been better for them to be proactive and in fact gone on the social media and said these images are not true, do not believe them?
I'll answer that immediately. First, insofar as we are missing the basic point over here, that is the nature of the medium. Now, nature of the medium is what distinguishes internet from other modes of expression. Now, when I'm talking to you, there's a target audience, and there's an assumption of the understanding of whatever I'm going to say for you to appreciate it. When you write on the net, however, you're writing to a diffused audience, an audience which have a cross-section as far as ages is concerned, political orientation, social maturity is concerned, or age is concerned. Now, once such messages go on...
sorry, that criteria does not, because when you're on television, you're speaking to the world.
No, when you're on television, you're speaking to the world, yes. But insofar as you have an option in that event to hear or not to hear, there's a particular point of time when the program is going to be heard. And the choice is whether to hear it at all or not. When you write something on the net, when retrieval on the internet, this is something which anyone familiar with cyber law would know. I want to retrieve information on the net. An incorrect search will lead me into an area which may not necessarily be relevant, but nevertheless may excite or incite me in some manner whatsoever. So when you're dealing with the internet, you have to deal with the lowest common denominator because of the expanse with which the internet deals with. But that is a separate issue altogether. Now, as far as the 66A is concerned, you said the alternative. Now, the question is, in a population into billions, you have instances of abuse, yes. But the question is, the instance of abuse so rampant as to say that as far as this particular provision is concerned, the provision is in some way constitutionally infirm. Now, there also, I don't know whether you have data. There is also data which says that as far as 66A is concerned, 66A does a yeoman service insofar as protecting women is concerned, insofar as restraining conduct is concerned, insofar as preventing stalking is concerned, insofar as sending messages where of menacing character anyway obscene.
Now, can you give one instance where it has done what you're saying?
So this is all, it's all available. This research, if any research is made of this particular issue, the instances you're talking, what instances do we normally talk about? We talk about Thackeray, we talk about Asim Trivedi, we talk about Chidambaram, right? Now 3, 4 multiplied by 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Now how many instances in all? How many instances in all of abuse would there be of this particular provision in a population of as huge as ours, and where there's internet access of the kind which exists over here? Now this is cherry picking information.
That is not an argument. That's like saying that there was only one rape in a year by one person on December 16th.
No, that's a
I'm sorry to say that. Look at all the people who.
That is not right.
Look at all the people who weren't murdered. Only one woman was murdered and raped.
You are
Let me be a straw man. You cannot say
out of
this is in fact not a straw man. It is Kapil Sibal's argument.
No, it's a straw man. I'm not concerned with Kapil Sibal. I'm not concerned with Narendra Modi. I'm concerned with the law. I'm concerned with the country.
No, 1 second, Aman. If you are saying that out of all the thousands of things, there are millions of things that have come out on the internet, out of that we've only had 4 or 5 arrests, even if there was one on a wrongful arrest, any one of those were wrongful arrest, you will admit, even one is more than enough. Can I just bring Chinmay in now?
I'm sorry, but I have to disagree. Most strongly.
Don't be sorry at all. You're welcome to disagree.
As far as 66A is concerned, there are other cases that have not received as much publicity. Like there's a case involving 2 pilots that were actually imprisoned and stayed there for a substantial period of time. You can also take a look at the transparency reports released by companies like Google that suggest that the nature of requests that are made using the IT Act are mostly politically motivated requests and are not requests for legitimate takedowns of content. But all that said, I would still agree with you, Madhu, and say that the fact that the law is subject to misuse suggests that there is a problem with the system. So for instance, one of the examples used to defend 66A is that it's very similar to section 127 of the UK, I think, Communications Act. But the comparable legislation in the UK has also been much criticized because a guy went on Twitter, I think his name was Paul Chambers, and he tweeted this sort of this tongue-in-cheek remark about blowing up the Robin Hood airport, and he was arrested. And it was criticized. The UK judiciary recognized that something needs to be done about the manner in which the law is used. It has to be used proportionally, and they have to check and see what is meant by a comment before running off and rounding up people.
Now, the thing is that we're looking at the international situation in how each government or various governments are handling the situation. In America, we have a situation in which the First Amendment is of prime importance and it's worshipped. So they have a situation where the government and government agencies have been trying to put restrictions on internet information, and they have a very powerful lobby of people who are fighting against it. So that turmoil is going on. Similarly, in the United Kingdom, the same kind of struggle between 2 factions. And I would say Europe is a little different. In India, China is, as you know, completely different. There is no lobby working for the freedom of the internet. And in India, we're in a very strange situation where it is actually a political situation. It becomes political because when somebody is arrested, it's usually there's a political background. In the sense, if you look at the tweet, the Facebook girls, it was Thackeray. If you look at the Asim Trivedi, it was Aam Aadmi. If you look at the Chidambaram's son's tweet, again that was political. So here we're dealing with people who are, and as you said in the Google Transparency Report, India's requests, 295 of them were related to political criticism, and only 9 were pornography. So what does that tell you in terms of controlling the internet?
You come back to the point, which is the question is, I'm not in any way saying that any kind of comment or criticism should be stifled. Nevertheless, we can't ignore the fact, we can't, unfortunately, the wrong kind of people take these arguments, is the reason why the arguments are discredited. We can't ignore the political reality of India. We can't ignore the fact where India is situated. We can't ignore the fact of the volatile nature of our polity, and we can't ignore the fact that we've got neighbors and other issues that are very hostile. So when you formulate a policy and implement it through a law, it has to be appropriate to the country and its situation. Now, because of the appropriate the country and situation, you can't possibly have license. There has to be some element of regulation. And when you look at this particular regulation, I'm not saying that it's not been abused. If you look at this particular regulation, if it is applied as it should be, as the mandate of the law suggests, in that event, the instances you're talking would be one of abuse of law and not application of law. Now, as long as the instances of abuse of law and not application of law, you can't follow the law. You have to follow the executive. That is those who have been entrusted with the application of the law. And for this reason itself, insofar as the act is concerned, the kind of criticism is ill-informed, if not misinformed, because it ignores altogether the structure of the section which is sought to be interpreted over here. When you look at the instances, we are not going to look at doing away with 66A. There are other ways in which you can do it. Insofar as make this offence non-cognizable. Don't give the police an arbitrary power to arrest. Make it bailable. And insofar as the question...
It is bailable.
No, exactly. Now, this is bailable. But nevertheless, point is that insofar as the power of the police to arrest, because bail would come only post-arrest. And arrest itself can be traumatic. And the prospect of arrest can, the word which is always used, chilling effect, will actually come in. So the fact of arrest is something which should be which will be a deterrent, but the power should be in any way not given to the police, but should be there should be permission to proceed in the matter. You approach a magistrate's court and then seek permission, give reasons for the purpose of dealing with it, and impose liability on the person who misuses it.
Aren't there enough laws already, though? Aren't there enough laws without the IT Act to allow the police to do a lot of these things?
You see, a law has to be appropriate to the medium. Now, as far as the laws you're talking about,
no, but defamation, and as Karen is saying, that defamation.
This is not defamation.
No, but I'm saying that the law that covers all that can simply be applied to the internet.
Yes, I'll answer that. I'll answer that. The question is, this is not defamation only. When you look at this is not defamation alone. This goes beyond defamation. The first part is not defamation. The second part is not defamation.
No, leave that aside. Leave the word defamation. The fact that you can...
You give the example of defamation. I'm saying this is nothing
I'm saying that whole law in which it includes defamation, invasion of privacy, all that is included without this particular law. If you are...
Invasion of privacy is not as far as the penal offence is concerned. We're not talking about invasion of privacy. Privacy will be a tort.
No, one second. When we're talking about this particular law, everything that this law says is already covered in Article 19.
No,
we did not need this 19A amendment.
Good you mentioned it. Now, if you look at 19, you see there's a distinction as far as the harm principle and offence principle is concerned. And much of the criticism as far as 66A is concerned is it says it keeps the bar very low and goes to the insofar as the offence principle is concerned. If you look at the Constitution, however, when it uses the word indecency, immorality, and all that, that goes to the offence principle only. Now, these particular terms are terms of wide import. What is indecency? What is immorality? Now, if you look at it, you'll have to say that 19.2, to the extent it in some way impinges upon 19.1a, is bad because of the ambiguous phrase insofar as those particular aspects are concerned. So you can't just condemn a law simply by reason of saying that, see, the phrases used are wide. You have to look at the law as it is.
You can actually condemn a law for that very reason. I mean, for example, take Nazi Germany. Half the laws did not follow the rule of law because they were so widely phrased that anyone could do it. Why are you concerned about Nazi Germany?
Talk about the case in point.
No, but that is actually...
We don't need to look.
No, we are talking about international laws and their misinterpretation.
Now, you see, Nazi Germany is completely irrelevant to this particular issue altogether.
It's about the rule of law, right?
It sounds nice in a casual conversation.
No, it's about the rule of law. If we have a rule that's sufficiently wide to be able to allow anyone to get persecuted.
We have to understand that our constitution was framed quite a while back, and like other democracies, we should expect our constitutional principles to evolve over time. So for instance, the USA's First Amendment was not sort of created super liberal. They had problems of intolerance as well, and then they slowly evolved principles like the heckler's veto through the Supreme Court's judgments as they went along. They did. And we've got a problem.
No, I'm disagreeing with the history of it, but it's not very relevant.
So we've got a problem where our constitution, yes, allows certain fairly wide restrictions of the right to free speech and expression, some of which were inserted but there by our First Amendment. But that apart, there is nothing that compels the government to use the reasonable restrictions in their full wide import. The government is aware that the UN special rapporteurs come out with reports particular to the internet, explaining how the right to free speech and expression can be preserved as far as possible, and explaining how laws can be made as reasonable as possible, and we choose to ignore them. So for example, Frank LaRue has said that one of the things we need to do is be as transparent as possible. Is the government releasing all the situations in which it's issuing takedown orders? Is the government releasing instances of all the arrests made under 66A along with the details?
Is actually aware of all of these instances?
It should be. I mean, it's these are all recorded started somewhere, right? So the moment you have a policy of transparency and you require people to make disclosures, then at least the public can scrutinize government action and hold the government accountable somewhat.
Do you not sometimes have the feeling, though, sorry, that a lot of it is actually individual government departments, local governments, local politicians acting of their own accord?
It can be local, it can be a local policeman, it can be a local mafia guy, anyone can complain, so anyone can take offense and action is taken. The problem over here is that in a place like the United States, where the only area that they have been successful in control is in child pornography and controlling access of minors to pornographic sites.
That's because they put an act.
Yes, but
they have a specific act
exactly,
for that particular purpose limited to that.
They've been able to pass that.
Act in addition.
Yeah, they've been able to pass that. In India, however, as compared to the United Kingdom and the United States and Europe, we have not made any attempt as such to control that part of the internet. The interests have been more to control the political situation. Child pornography, all these pornographic sites, very rarely are they closed down or whatever, they're ignored.
Sorry, Madhu.
No,
Okay, you first.
Yeah. One quick one, I think, on controlling internet, including pornography. I don't think the US has actually managed to do that. Child pornography still exists on the internet. It's harder to find.
They've got fines for it, and
there's offenses, but it just goes underground. The more offenses and the more punishments you have, the more it goes underground. And similarly, the more you ban offensive speech on Twitter or on Facebook, people will just use different channels to share these messages.
And David Cameron came up with a new one when he said that we're going to ban all pornographic channels, and if you want to watch, you have to make a special application and fill up a form and say you want to watch.
And again, that's a slippery slope, because once you start banning one thing and you have the technology in place to ban something completely, how far are you from the Chinese firewall that enables you to ban dissenting statements and these kind of things?
These are more emotive. It's something which people would like to hear and accept, but not necessarily something which has substance. Now, if you, as a matter of fact, parade the opinion of the fact, that will not make the opinion a fact as such. Look at, in far as pornography is concerned, the IT Act deals with pornography in two. We are not dealing with that particular section in any case. 66A is a different issue altogether. Though 66A may have been used for the purposes of dealing with political comment, but you can't say the purpose 66A is to deal with political comment. So what will be wrong is the manner in which it is implemented in the isolated instances where it is. But because it's implemented in that manner, you can't simply say that the act as framed is infirm in any manner whatsoever.
I think, stepping back a little bit, I firstly would like to question this idea that Indians are more volatile than everyone else. This is what the Chinese use as justification for controlling information within their country. That's one. Two is that we have section 67A and B that do deal with child pornography specifically and with pornography in general. So 66A is not necessary for this. And three is that I love how, well, I don't actually love it, I'm being sarcastic, how our government gets away with framing all these wide laws that, by the way, have been criticized by our own parliamentary standing committees that have looked at them and found them to be worded unnecessarily widely, and say that, yeah, well, everyone does this. Now, the UN Special Rapporteur has said
what does everyone does this mean?
Other countries.
So China does it or America does it? Who are we following
sometimes
here?
they say that we're following the UK.
That's no
exactly.
excuse. Yeah,
absolutely no excuse. So if the government was really interested in regulating only harmful speech and not using it for political gain or whatever, carrying out other agendas, they would come up with narrowly phrased law. They would come up with lists that make it very clear to people making the arrests what kind of speech is not acceptable and what kind of speech does not get charged under this. They would release lists of the kind of people that are being arrested.
So you're saying there is a motivation in keeping this vague in order to be so that it becomes more sweeping.
It might be negligence, but I'm saying.
I'm sorry, you're being very kind. Just one second, Aman. You're being very kind calling it negligence, because you can't imagine that people who have put this word these amendments in, have not thought every single word through. These are lawyers.
I would actually
this was
agree
the
with Chinmay, the way it's written. I mean, if you look at the placement of commas and the typos in some of these sections, you would doubt that lawyers or anyone legally trained has written it. I mean, I don't know if we have it right here, the section, but it doesn't make any sense. Grammatically, the section doesn't make any sense, and legally, if you're reading through it, it doesn't make any sense because it basically bans everything. And I don't think any reasonable lawyer would read this on its natural meaning and say, this law makes sense and it should ban everything. I think
I don't
even
know,
you're saying
how
It was a last minute insertion.
it was a last minute insertion. These are snippets of information available on the net, which can actually being used all the time.
No, what last minute insertion means that nobody else has a time to discuss it, debate it, or actually fight or argue against it, and it's slipped in like that. I would be suspicious of that right away. As a lawyer, you should be extremely suspicious.
No, I'm not. Why should I be suspicious of something which on the face of it, I don't think, whatever his opinion may be, and I disagree where that is concerned, we need regulation. Insofar as this particular act is concerned, intelligently applied, it's not liable to abuse. If a provision is to be abused, it has got nothing to do with the act. It's the person who is actually authorized to implement it. In this particular case, what is the alternative to control? Either there is self-regulation or there is an external regulation.
I'll tell you what the
let's let me complete, because first of all, the 3 points which were taken are completely wrong. Insofar as if anyone initiated in law would know that when you make a particular provision, you can't ever make a provision so precise as to deal with every situation, because what may actually happen in the future is not something which can be anticipated. So when an act is made, it is in aid of policy to deal with the myriad situations. And because they deal with the myriad situations, the question of precision, I'm not saying the precision is not required, but precision of the kind to actually specify when only can an action be taken is something which is a legal impossibility. The act or the law should contain the general guidelines in which you have to say that we have to how to implement it. What's the policy behind it? And the policy behind this is just to make sure that insofar as some kind of anarchic situation is concerned, which can lead to some kind of a volatile consequences, what should be in some way be prevented. But insofar as regulation is concerned, so that you have a right to express yourself, that will not be touched. Now, if this is the scheme,
it has been touched. Gyan, please tell, how would you compare these amendments to the United States, to United Kingdom? Let's leave China and Korea out for, let's compare it to these two countries.